Hey pet lovers, welcome to the first official episode of Foster Tales. My name is Becca, and we're going to talk today about what you need for being a foster. And we're going to talk about dogs and cats. We're not going to talk about horses or anything crazy like that today. We're just going to stick with the primary ones that most people foster. So, let's start out by cats, okay? Number one. You need a litter box, and there are several different types of litter boxes. You have just the plain litter box with no top, and you get a scoop to go with it to help you clean it out. Second type is one that actually has a lid on it. Those are for cats that kick litter everywhere. And the third type is a fancy type of litter box that's self-cleaning. Has a pan in the bottom that you just have to clean that out like once a week or every 3 days or something like that, depending on which one you get. So that's that one. So with the litter box, you need to make sure that you are regularly cleaning the litter box at least once a day. With smaller kittens, you may need to clean it more than once a day. With multiple cats, like if you have 3 to 5 kittens or something like that, you will need to clean it once or twice a day. For not only for cleanliness, but also to look for worms or weird stool or anything like that. I'll talk about that more in another video. But that's the main rules for a litter box. Okay, so number 2 is the food. And let's start out with the youngest part of life and go to adulthood. So for the youngest part of life, normally when kittens are born, they nurse on mom. But what if you do if mom is not available to nurse? You have to use kitten formula, and then you have to use a syringe and a special made nipple that goes on the end of the syringe so you can feed the kittens properly. And you can get kitten formula at basically any pet store, farm store, sometimes Walmart and Target have them. Just look, and if you know you're going to be getting what we call a bottle baby, make sure that you have that stuff ready and available. And if you don't, and you're picking one up from a rescue, always ask the rescue if they are able to supply the things you need, because sometimes they'll have, and I'll have a picture of it, is a miracle nipple which goes on the end of the syringe, and it's a shorter and it has a smaller tip on it, and it's much easier for the kittens to get milk out of that than just a regular plain old one that you can get from a Walmart or Target or something. It works much better, and it's more comfortable too for the kittens. It's not as floppy, and it's more like mom. So there's that. Now we're going to talk about kittens that are weaned. Weaned kittens normally have a mixture of the milk. Depending on if you have the mom cat available, you mix some of her milk in with some wet food, and it makes kind of like this goop that sometimes you'll have to clean the kittens up afterwards, because they'll basically get in the bowl with the food, and just it gets everywhere. So be prepared to have some wipes handy to clean them off. But when they get past that weaning point, then they go on to hard food like Bully Buffalo or just Friskies or anything like that, and then you mix it with wet food. So wet food and dry food mix is what I normally do with my foster kittens. And then as they get towards adulthood, you can go more towards the solid food, and then every once in a while put the wet food in, so it's not as difficult on their stomach, so they can process it better. So that's food. You need to look on the back of the bag and check the nutrients and make sure that your cat or kitten is getting the amount of nutrients that it needs, and it doesn't have any byproducts or anything like that, if you want the best food to raise your cat or kitten on. But you also need to make sure that you don't overfeed the cat, because fat cats are harder to get around. It can be more challenging for them to live at the highest quality of life. So just make sure that you don't overfeed your cat if at all possible. I know people who leave food out all day for their cats, and you will have to dump that out if they don't eat all of it, because it gets stale, and stale food is not very tasty for cats. Plus, during warmer weather, if you have any sort of insects that get in the house, you can find sugar ants and different things in the cat food, and that's not good for them to ingest either. Just make sure that your cat gets the right nutrients and what it needs. Now, one last thing on bottle babies before I forget, going back to like litter box type thing, is bottle babies, you have to stimulate them to go, and that can be a difficult process. So if you don't know how to do that and you're not comfortable with feeding a kitten, which is not like a baby, or stimulating them to go to the bathroom every single time you feed them, then I would suggest not fostering those kittens until you have a little bit of experience with a professional. So just letting you guys know. But if you find kittens that need help and you want to keep them in your house, you know, until you can find a better person to take care of them, then, you know, I'll have a video of more instructions on how to bottle feed the kittens and everything. And there's a chart out there that has the amount of food that they need to eat, and depending on their age and their weight, you know, they have a certain amount that they're supposed to be fed. So moving on past food and bathroom, you need the different necessities. Like, you need at least a bed for them to sleep in, and beds can be anywhere from just a couple of dollars at your local pet store, it's not that expensive, to extremely crazy pet beds that you won't believe exist. And if it's not a cat that you're going to be keeping for life, I wouldn't go crazy with the expense, unless you're going to be fostering for a long period of time, like years or such, that you have, you know, the money to invest in a long period of time. I would, you know, suggest doing that. Next thing is toys. You will need toys for either kittens or adult cats. They need recreation, so they don't get bored, because especially if you have just one cat, they'll get bored just kind of wandering around the room with nothing to do. And even kittens, when they have nothing to do and they just play with each other, they tend to hurt each other, and it's not good. So you can get you can get mice toys. You can get a ball with a little bell in the middle. You can get laser pointers, ball tracks. I mean, it's endless the amount of toys that you can have. Honestly, in my own opinion, I recommend not letting kittens play with catnip in it. I don't think it's good for younger kittens to be exposed to catnip. That's just my own personal opinion. But since catnip tends to make cats a little nuts, and especially when they're playing harder as babies and there's multiple of them, if it rips open, catnip goes everywhere, and you might find a bunch of drunk cats laying in the corner and not moving very much, and that can be kind of scary if they can be over intoxicated by catnip. So that's just my own personal recommendation. You don't have to follow that. If you would like to give your some kitties some of the catnip toys, go ahead, but that's just my recommendation. Okay, the next thing to talk about is just some extra things that you can get to help your cat. You need to get a cat scratcher, because we all know cats love to scratch things. And if you don't supply something for them to scratch on, they will probably scratch up something you don't want, like a decorative pillow, your couch, your bed, your carpet. I've known some of my kittens to actually scratch at the carpet because I didn't have scratching posts available. You can use just like a board with rope wrapped around it. If you can't afford, you know, one of the ones that are pre-made, or you can get a pre-made one, and they come with just ones that hang on the door, 2 little platforms on the floor to like ones that are like a partial cat tree. There are tons of different ones you can get there. The next thing that is not a must, but I recommend it if you have cats that are yours in the house, and let them tend to use this as well. But also your fosters will love this too, especially if you have multiple kittens that are young, is a cat tree. We all know what cat trees are. They're carpet covered. They can climb up and down it. There's beds on it. There's toys that hang off the bottom of it. It's just lots of fun, and it's made for multiple cats. One cat may play with it, but they're not going to get, they're not going to run around it much as, 3 kittens would. So that's just my recommendation for that. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is nail trimmer. You need to trim the kitten's nails. Kittens' nails tend to grow very fast, and like a cat that normally would take a week to grow one length, it takes a kitten half that time. So normally if you trim your adult cat's claws every 2 weeks, you will need to trim your kitten's claws every week pretty much, because they get long and sharp very quickly. So make sure that you have a nail trimmer on hand, and if you don't know how to trim cat claws, seek help from someone who knows, or look up a YouTube video, or I can put one up if you guys would like me to, showing you how that works. But you need to do it, or they're just going to destroy everything even more. They're going to hurt each other. If you have multiple cats, they can actually poke each other in the eye, or in the nose, or in the face, or, their claws can actually break off. So they need to be trimmed. And the last thing to talk about is bathing and giving your cat flea medication monthly. Basically, baths are good for 3 things. 1, as a foster, you need them to get used to water. So when they go to their permanent home, they're less likely to freak out over a bath like our cat does. Our cat sounds like you're killing it because we didn't start it early enough. 2, the cleanliness of the animal is really good, especially when you're having to take them to a foster event every week or 2. You need to make sure they're perfectly clean and smell good for their new home, because stinky cats are stinky cats, and people may be less likely to adopt a cat that smells really bad. Just in all honesty, especially with cats, because they're supposed to be cleaner animals than dogs. 3 is fleas. Fleas are they are pests, and I actually worked with a veterinarian one time that called them your pets, and they're just annoying. And so you need to flea treat your animal every month. But to start the process off, before you put the flea meds on them, try to give them a bath and get most of the fleas off. Depending on the age of the kitten, with the bottle baby kittens, I wouldn't recommend using Dawn on them like you do with the older kittens and the adult cats. You can use Dawn and some other shampoo and stuff that are, pet friendly, cat friendly, with the chemicals. But you can use that to get the fleas, try to get them to die off and get off of the cats before you give them their flea medication. Either, the Capstar to go ahead and start killing them off, or the actual topical medication that you put on their neck. So that's it for that. So now we're going to move on to our other animal, dogs. And we're going to start off very similar. Basically, we all know dogs do not use litter boxes, and if your dog does use a litter box, then how did you train them to do that? Because I don't even know how you would, because most dogs, you get them near a cat box and they eat the litter, and that can be bad because it can get stuck, and they have to go in and do surgery if it falls up in their intestines, and it's gross. But anyway, so since they don't use a litter box, you can't tend to them all the time, so what do I recommend? Puppy pads. And puppy pads can either be just a pad that lays on the floor and you lay a whole bunch of them down and they do their business on the pad until they're old enough to be taught to go outside. There's a different puppy pad that have seen recently, and I have a picture of it right here, that the pad sits in a tray. So when they use it, if they use it a lot, it doesn't soak through the pad and onto your floor or wherever you have them. It just soaks through the pad onto the tray, and then you take care of the tray and clean it out, and it's better than just leaking through onto your floor. So I recommend that one if you can afford it. I'm not sure how much that is, but the puppy pads are normally pretty cheap. Then, as they get older, you need to introduce them to being outside. Now, you need a fenced-in yard, if at all possible, when you have especially a puppy or a foster dog that is not really used to people and it could have been a stray or whatever. You need to have a fenced-in yard so whenever you let it out to go potty, it just doesn't bolt. And especially if it's a hound breed, you will never see that dog ever again if you let it out with no fence. So my recommendation, of course, is the fenced-in yard. You slowly introduce it outdoors, supervised. Do not leave that dog unsupervised, even in the dark. We just had a 13-week-old pup, and my husband and I, when they had to go out at night, we would go outside with him with a flashlight and stand there with the flashlight and wait until she was done doing her business and then bring her in the house. And that's just what you have to do. And unless you have a doggy-o, like a patio for the dog to go out and potty on some grass where they're completely shut in, you may not want to let them run your entire backyard when all you want them to do is go to the bathroom. So there is that. So next thing that you need to talk about here is food. First and foremost, same thing with the kittens. You have puppies that can be bottle babies, so you will need the same supplies. You will need a syringe, you will need the formula, and you will need a miracle nipple or any nipple I can't talk, sorry guys, that you find in a store to be able to feed them. And the same thing with the kittens. There is a feeding chart depending on the weight and the age to make sure you're not overfeeding or underfeeding, because both can be very, very bad. But dealing with the weaning process is very similar. And then when they get to be adults, of course, you want to make sure you're not overfeeding. Dogs tend to eat much faster and more than cats will. That's not always the case, but it seems like with our animals, that's what happens. And with our fosters we've had, you don't know where they're coming from. You don't know if they were a stray or if, they're just a puppy that was abused. So they may not hardly touch their food, or they gobble it all down so fast it seems like you're like, oh, I need to feed them more because I didn't feed them enough. No, don't do that. Make sure you check the back of the bag of whatever food you're feeding them and make sure you feed them the right amount. And if you need to with a puppy or a younger dog, you could, instead of feeding them twice like you do with an adult dog who's used to you, you could feed them 3 times. Normally when I have fosters, I feed them in the morning at 4 o'clock and around 10 or 11. That's kind of my what I do. But if you work 9 to 5, you feed them at 7 or 8, and then you feed them at 6 o'clock, and then you feed them right before you go to bed. That's fine too. So whatever you're able to do, if you work full time, then you'll have to work around that schedule. If you work from home, you can switch that a little bit. Or if you have a sitter, you talk to them, you get them to work that out. But it depends on you and depends on your time schedule. So just make sure that you're not overfeeding or underfeeding the animal, because they will act like you've never fed them before. So always check to make sure you're feeding them the right amount. So the next thing that we have is toys. Toys are very important because they are recreation for your animal, especially for when you're not around, you're gone at work, or you've gone out to a movie or something. They need something to do. So toys are good, and they're also good when you're home and you have to wash dishes, do laundry, or help your kids with homework or something. It's always good to have recreation for the animal when you can't pay attention to them 24/7. So it's different for the age of puppies. Bottle babies don't tend to, and this is the same for kittens too, in this point of view. Bottle babies don't really move around very much. They sleep the majority of the day. Sounds like a cat, doesn't it? But they normally are so small that you put them in a smaller area, and then you feed them, you potty them, and then you put them up for a couple of hours. And then you start the whole process over again. And trust me, when you have young enough puppies or kittens, you will be up feeding them every 2 hours, and it is exhausting. I've done it one time. And it's actually made me sick because I wasn't used to being up for that long. So if you have you don't have the time, like if you work full time, I would not recommend taking a bottle baby into your care, because you do have to take care of it every couple of hours, and it has to be done on time, because you need to make sure they're getting that nutrition during their younger years, or you could potentially lose them, and they won't survive. So when they get a little bit older, it's not so much as a time constraint. They need the same amount of food, but that's why adults normally get fed twice a day, because, you know, they get fed in the morning, they're fed in the evening, and that's all we can do because we're gone at work. So, the toys are good for the time when you're not there and they're still kind of bored and hungry or whatever. For dogs, for puppies, I recommend for teething, you do get the teething products that they have out there, the soft bones that lead up to a harder bone in their older. They have like teething rings and things like that. A rope bone is also good. A softer rope bone, a smaller one, is also good for teething pups. Sometimes a softer ball is good too, because our last foster, she would put it all the way back here in her mouth, and that's where she was teething, and she would just sit there and chew on that ball, and that's how she would teeth. So that was very comforting for her. So depends on what you guys can do. The other toys that I would recommend besides rope bones is stuffed animals, but then again, stuffed animals are great, but if you have 3 different types of dogs, you have the shredder. The shredder means that they're going to just destroy the toy, and there's going to be fluff all over your house from the inside of the toy. Then you have the ones like one of our dogs that pokes a little bitty hole about that big in the toy and pulls the stuffing out from there. So those are the ones that kind of defluff the toys. So sometimes stuffed animals can be good, but they do, if you have a younger dog, they tend to be destroyed a lot faster than an older dog that may chew on it once in a while and not rip it apart. But it depends on your dog. Just kind of get to know them and see what they exactly need. They also have a product called, and I'm not advertising for them, but this is a good product to get, Kong. Kong is normally a harder toy, that it's harder for an animal to tear up. They have tons of different ones. One of the products that we have that I love is this one that I have a picture of right here. And basically the little sphere that you see, there's a hole in the bottom of it about that big. And you can put treats in there, and they put it in the floor, they roll it around, and the treats roll out, and they learn, oh, it's recreation. I can push my nose and treats will roll out, and I have something to do. Or if they're not really interested in that, and you need them to do something for a while so you can get some stuff done, or to put their anxiety down for when you leave the house, take the Kong, fill the inside of it with peanut butter, and leave it for them, and that's like fun for hours for a dog. For some reason, they love peanut butter. Don't feed them peanut butter too often though, because it is very fattening, and it will fatten up the pooch. So just let you know. Then we have bedding, of course, which is just like cats. You can buy a cheap little bed, or you can go extravagant. So it's kind of up to you. It's up to your budget. Of course, it also depends on how many dogs you're fostering at the same time, and what area you're going to have them in. If you're going to have them in a wired cage, you're going to have to get something that's either big enough to fit in the cage comfortably where they can still get to their food and you don't have to set it on the bed. Or if you have them in a bigger area, you need to figure out what size bed would be good if you have multiple pets. Like if you have a nursing mom with pups, you're going to have different bedding for that than you would just a regular puppy. And make sure that it's okay. Whatever sheet or blanket you use, you're not really planning on using it for much more than your pets, because if they tear it up or mess on it, it'll be okay if you don't get all the stains out or all the rips out of it. And, it's just permanently used for your pets. So we have towels and stuff that we have of our own that we set aside and just use for our fosters. I would highly recommend doing something like that and kind of keep your stuff separated from your foster stuff. And even more, if you can afford it, go get like a cheap little blanket from Walmart and use that as your foster stuff and not use it for your pets, because if you get a sick animal with like an upper respiratory infection or something, you don't need to pass those germs back and forth to your own pets and the one you're fostering, because they can't, it's contagious and they can't get sick if you're not cleaning up after them. So, and then next thing that we need to talk about is the same thing with cats. You need a nail trimmer, because you're going to have to cut their claws just like you will on a cat. And those on the bottom of a dog's paw with the nail, if they have darker colored nails, like most dogs and cats are like us and they have, white nails, and it's easy to see the quick. But if they have dark colored nails, you can't really see it from the top side. But if you flip the paw over and look, the majority of the time there is a little white line at almost the quick line, where you need to cut the dog's nails to make sure you don't put it in the quick. You need to go above that white line to trim it. And do a little bit more research on that. And ask your veterinarian, or, if you're not sure about how to cut the dog's nails correctly, just ask. And I'm sure people would be happy to help you. The last thing is, of course, bathing them. And for the same couple of reasons, you got to get them used to water. You got to get them used to people bathing them. And know that it's a good thing, not a bad thing. Then you got to make sure that they smell good for foster adoption days. So they go to a home. I like them to go to a home clean, so they know when they look at the dog, it hasn't been rolling around in the mud. It doesn't have mud stuck to it. I like doing it that way. It just looks cleaner. And of course, the third reason is parasites. You need to make sure there are no ticks and no fleas or nothing else on that dog, to keep their coat healthy and clean, and make sure they're healthy and clean. So always make sure that you bathe the dog regularly, check them for fleas and ticks regularly, and get that taken care of. So now I'm going to give you guys, I know especially sometimes in certain areas, fleas are very, very hard to get rid of because there are just an abundance of them. So my husband and I have found a mixture that we use with our dogs, plus afterwards putting the actual flea medication on them. So here's what it is. It's Dawn, warm water, and a little bit of white vinegar. Don't put too much white vinegar because it can hurt burn the skin and irritate the skin. So just use a little bit, but that does seem to help. There are other things out there, like lavender. They hate lavender, I've heard that. But the vinegar mixture does seem to work. And then adding the topical medication on after they're dry from their bath with that vinegar stuff been used, it seems to work a little bit better for those hard to get rid of fleas. That doesn't always work, but it does in our case, so I would recommend that to you. So that's basically it for which you absolutely have to have that I would recommend for your fosters. So if you guys have any questions or anything that you would like me to see, leave it down in the description below. And one last thing that I'm going to talk about before I leave here today is that when I do a foster video like vlogs, I'm going to be putting those up, and those are going to be of our fosters and some of our pets interacting and things like that, but we're not always going to have fosters. So like right now, our 13-week-old puppy just went off to a rescue, so we don't have a foster right now. But kitten season is coming very quickly upon us. It starts in March, which is next month, so we will probably be getting some kittens here pretty soon. But until we get another foster, I still want to put some videos up for you guys. I'll do more of these types of informational videos and whatever you guys would like to see. But I'm also planning on playing some Sims 4 pets with a family that I build, and just seeing how that goes. So if you guys would like to see that and you would like to see more of this, hit that like button and hit subscribe. And until next time, I hope you guys have a great day and keep loving pets. Bye guys.